Good afternoon. I'm Nikki Antonovich. It's my pleasure to welcome you to Module 1 of the Data-Driven Decision-Making for Educational Leaders training from the California Department of Education. Throughout the next 4 modules, over the course of the year, we'll journey from summative data to interim data to the ecosystem of support, and we'll end with the importance of a local data culture. This module here focuses on starting with the summative results. I'm going to pass you off to Joe.
All right, thank you, Nikki. Good afternoon, everybody. Before we jump into today's agenda, we just want to align ourselves with where we are going in this training series. So today we will start with the summative results to glean information on next steps. In Module 2, the data and CERS, we will connect CERS data to next steps for classroom instruction. Module 3, it's all about the tools available in the ecosystem of support, and we will explore each one. And we will close with Module 4, building your local data system, where we will discuss why local data-driven decision-making is important. So what are we going to cover today in our session on starting with summative results? First, we will review the claim connections in the summative assessments. Then we'll analyze our summative results. We're actually going to go on a couple of really cool field trips. We'll go together. We're going to have some live demonstrations. And we will connect what we see in the summative results to the smarter balanced interim assessments. We've set the following learning goals today. At the end of today, we should all be able to understand how claims and targets connect to instruction, how to use smarter balanced summative assessment data to plan for next steps in instruction, and where to use smarter balanced interim assessments, and also how interims can be used throughout the year. And with that, I am going to hand it off to Dr. Corey Greenlaw.
All right, thank you very much, Joe. Happy to be here. Corey Greenlaw, I work with Fresno County Superintendent of Schools, and we're excited to be able to be here and think through the process that we have around this idea of assessment. And remember, you're going to hear information today, but we're demonstrating a process that we hope you will take back with you and use at your school sites, at your districts, and the rest. So we're going to show you these things. We're going to give you some resources, but the most important part of this is that you're able to take this process and literally take it back in and apply it back. So you'll see some of those today, and Joe's will take you through some really great activities that you'll be able to go and replicate. But for us to do it, we have to make sure that we have a good understanding of the claim information that we're going to talk about, because this is going to drive us in our journey forward. So let's take it from the left-hand side of the screen first. And if you look at this there, you'll see that we have a picture of a young lady. This really represents the fact that we're talking student level data first. Remember, student local assessments, that's where most of our idea of this idea around assessment starts. We have a nice connection where we move into the local assessments that the state of California that we've done, and then we move into some of the claims and the scale scores, which is part of our statewide assessment system, the overall score that you see for our scale score really is used to calculate the academic indicator. And we call that calculation the distance from standard, which is the average of how far each student, keep this in mind, so you keep this, how each student is from the lowest scale score needed to obtain a level 3. Now that's important for us because that's going to take us into our accountability piece. So you can see that we go all the way from that student, which is the local assessment information. But remember, this dashboard information that we saw, or that we're going to see here soon, starts all the way back with the students. So we need to make sure that we're considering the areas that have some of the most powerful impact on students, on teaching, and on what we're doing. And that's that local assessment data. So let's keep that in mind, even though we're going to talk big picture, even though we're going to talk some about the claims, and we're going to talk about some of the accountability and get off, we're going to take it always back into the students. So let's dig a little bit deeper so that way we have a better understanding of what happens in the background of these assessments. We need to talk a little bit about claims. And I think most of us know this, but if we don't have this basis for what we're talking about, it makes some of the resources we're going to share later on a little bit hard to understand. So we have an overall scale score that we get, we've talked about, and that's kind of broken down by different claims. So let's talk about what those claims are. You have 4 claims in language arts. You have the reading, the writing, listening, and research and inquiry. You also have 4 claims in math. Although we only measure it, we put it together in 3 areas on the actual scale score. So you'll see that it's written out as areas when we talk about it in your score sheets. Concepts and procedures, problem solving and data analysis, and communicated reasoning. So problem solving is one claim, data analysis is a different claim. We combine them for measurement purposes. And if you really want to nerd out about that, email me later, we'll talk about all the background, but that's really what it is. So when we're talking about it, you have 3 areas there in math, and you're going to have 4 areas or claims that you're going to have in ELA. When we look at those, yeah, we're going to move forward with the standards. So usually we stop at that target, but we're going to move in. We all know what standards are. We've heard about this forever. That standard is the breakdown of really what the state of California has identified to say this is what a student needs to know and understand. The cool thing is that when California identified that through the California the standards that we have that were done years ago, we had the claims which we want to be able to say this is what we want to be able to say about a student in ELA or math or whatever. That linkage between those were the targets, and targets were designed by test developers to really get at an idea to say this is what we need to observe from a student. This is what they should be able to know and do to be able to say we can demonstrate or say something about that claim. Targets are the linkage that we get between standards and claims. Those targets are in there. We're going to focus on those as we're going through and looking at the resources, because that's how we're going to be able to choose and identify some of the work we're going to go forward. So as we get a better understanding of that background, it's going to help you as you go into some of the stuff that Joe's going to take you to next.
All right, thank you, Corey. And I completely forgot to introduce myself. My apologies, everybody. I am Joe Valero, and I am an executive leadership coach over here at the Office of the Fresno County Superintendent of Schools. So once again, my apologies. I just assumed everybody knew me, so which is not a good thing, right? Okay, so why are we talking about claims, targets, standards, distance from standard? Why are we having that conversation? Well, we wanted to build a little bit of background information, because as we are starting to go in and look at data from last year's Smarter Balanced Summative Assessment, we can break it down overall targets, or not targets, excuse me, claims, overall and by claims. And so we want to make sure that we're grounded in what those mean. And so we wanted to really go over and visualize what that flow is. So as we talk through any data-driven decision-making, we are going to be using last year's Smarter Balanced as our starting point. All right, so what we're going to be going through right now is a live demo of the test results for California's assessments webpage. But before we do, we want to note that we're going to go in and actually view claim level data in the aggregate. And we just really want to point out that this is the spot, this is the area, this is the website that houses claim level data information. In the past, we were able to access that in CERS and some of our local systems, and we had access to it by student. But due to the adjusted form, we need groups of 30 or more in order to have claim level data. So this will be the site where we will be able to get more granular data on our students and how they performed. So you'll really want to go over and make sure that we're connecting this to our local information and local data as we're moving along. So before I leave this presentation though, just really want to point out, as we are looking at data that it was just released on the test results for California's assessments website, this is going to be a view through the lens of a compass. We want to think of this like a compass. It's a starting point. It's going to guide us in a general direction, just where we might be able to begin. So it's not going to be the turn by turn like GPS. It's going to be just a general direction we could begin with, and to start us out with. So just wanted to go over and make sure we prefaced it with that. So with that, I'm actually going to leave the presentation right now. And we're going to have a quick data walkthrough with accessing scores. So Nikki mentioned earlier, the note-taking guide has been updated. And so scores are public. We can go in and we can see them. Everybody has access to it. The best way to access the site, if you don't have access to your note-taking guide, let's say that you left today's webinar here and you're just thinking, oh my goodness, this is fantastic. I want to share this with everybody. What is the easiest way to access the site? Well, if we go to CAASPP.org, all of us are familiar with this. We use this site to go over and access TOMS and all of our other sites. Up at the very top right now, you'll actually see an important update. It says the data has been publicly released on the test results for California's assessments website. So if I click on that link, it's going to take me into the site itself. And so I'm going to actually click on the very first tile, top left corner, English language arts and literacy and mathematics. Other assessments are in here as well. You'll also see alternate assessments, the California alternates. The ELPAC is housed in here along with science and the CSAs and alternate science results. All of them are going to be living in here. But for today's purposes, we want to go over, we want to take a step back and just look through what we had in our data last year. So we're going to click on English language arts and mathematics. And I am a 150 person in my very old age. I needed to be zoomed. So I'm going to zoom our screen just a little bit. And so as we click into the page, by default, it's going to give us state level data first. So notice it's giving me state of California, and it's going to give me what we like to refer to as the donut. And so it'll break it down for you. Percentage of students that were standard exceeded, percentage of students standard met, standard nearly met, and standard not met. And in the middle, it'll give you percentage of students that were either, that were both met and exceeded, met or exceeded. So that's what we will see in the middle. We also just want to point out too, we could go over, change the year if we want to previous years. You can view it through different grade levels, student groups, which is very, very important, and school types. So if we're wanting to go over and look for our individual organizations we work for or we support, you can click on top and we'll type it in. So one of the easiest ways, I know this is, it sounds very simple, but best way to do it, you type it in, wait for it to appear for you on your drop down, and then click on it. So it'll make navigation of the site just a little bit easier. But for now, we're going to use state of California as a whole, as the data we're going to look through. And so the other thing we just want to point out is this is one way to look at the data. It doesn't mean it's the only way. It doesn't mean it's the perfect way. This is one way to look at the data. It's one way to go over, take it back, and by all means, make it better, improve it, add things, take away things. But it's just one way to go over and look through the data to go over and simplify some of our views. So once again, we're using state of California data. And so once again, we like to call this the donut. But the donut doesn't necessarily help us with making decisions, with going over and identifying areas of opportunities. But that's where the really great features and the really cool features of this site come into play. So you can see me moving my cursor down, and you'll see a button below English Language Arts, and it says View ELA Detailed Test Results. If I click on that button, now we've gone beyond the donut. We've gone beyond just really looking at standard met and standard exceeded. Now it changes the view for me. We have a breakdown by grade level, percentage of students, and for this one, it's third grade. Percentage of third grade students, standard not met, percentage of students met, and then standard exceeded. Great information, but very similar to what we saw in the donut. So if I keep scrolling down, it's going to give me even more information. Average scale score. But if we keep scrolling, now we're going to start seeing the areas. And so this one right here, we're using English language arts as an example, but we have our claims. Here's reading, writing, listening, and research and inquiry. So now we've gone from a very broad percentage of students that met or exceeded, and now we're getting into actual claim level data. And that's why we were talking about claims just a little bit earlier. So now, when we look at reading, it will break it down by percentage of students scoring above standard, near standard, and below standard. And it will also break it down by grade level, ultimately to all grade levels. So we have that for reading, writing, listening, and research and inquiry. One thing we like to do is we like to simplify the view. We like to go over and have a simplistic approach to going over and finding areas of opportunities. And so we could use above standard, we could use near standard, but once again, going into that whole through line that we were showing earlier, from accountability over to the classroom and over to students and instruction, focusing on the percentage of students below standard. This is going to sound really weird, but we like to focus on percentage of students below standard, and we like to reduce that percentage. We want to go over, we want this number to be reduced. We want it to actually shrink. So what are we going to do, and how might we find areas of opportunities? As we're looking at that bottom area, percentage of students scoring below standard, we want to go over and identify, maybe it's in the reading claim, and actually we're going to really, really simplify this. We're going to go very, very vanilla here. But if I were to just look at the percentage of students, all grades, that are scoring below standard in reading, that would be a 23.29%. If I look at writing, 30% of our students are scoring below standard in writing. We go down to listening, we have about 15%. And research and inquiry, 19%. So I'm going to zoom out just slightly so we can have all of them on the same screen at the same time. So just by, this is a very, very high view right now. We want to get more granular, but just by looking at this view right now, reading, 23% of our students are below standard. Writing, 30%. Listening, 15%. And research and inquiry, about 19% are below standard. Just by looking at those percentages right now, and once again, this is a very high level view right now, but just by looking at those, what might be our greatest area of opportunity just to start with? Remember, this is like a compass. It's just giving us a guide as to where we may want to begin in terms of where we want to support our students, where we might want to start. So once again, we don't want these percentages to be very big. We want these to be as small as possible. We want the least percentage of students scoring below standard. So reading, 23%, 30%, writing, listening, and then research and inquiry. So as we're looking through this data right here, our highest percentage of students scoring below standard is in writing. That might be an area of opportunity we want to focus on. That's the highest percentage of students that are showing us, that our data is showing us, we need to go over and support. We need to reduce this percentage. We need to attack this. So this is just an overall view right now. Earlier, we were talking about, we also have the ability on this website to look at student groups. So you'll see disability status, economic status, gives us just a really, really good, I was almost gonna say like a buffet of different, it's getting a little late, I'm getting a little hungry, but a buffet of just different options. So I'm actually going to click on the very first one, which is disability status. I'm going to click apply sections. Notice it's going to change my view on my screen. I now have the option to view this through students that have reported disabilities or no reported disabilities. Let's look at our students with reported disabilities. Once again, looks very similar when we first opened it up. We were familiar with this. It gives us our breakdown, but notice we have a larger percentage of students now that are standard not met. I'm going to keep scrolling. And as we look at our claims, now we have 48% of our students that are below standard. In writing, 63, listening, 32, and research and inquiry, 40.8. We like to say we want to go beyond the donut. We want to go beyond the all student group as well. We want to go over and get as granular as we can as we're looking at this data. So let's show one more example. These were students with reported disabilities. Now let's go to English language fluency. I'm going to click apply selections. It's going to give me many different options. How do I want to view this data? Do I want to view it through the lens of our fluent English proficient students and English onlys? Do we want to view it through our ELs that were enrolled less than 12 months or more, EOs? But for our purposes today, let's just look at our straight English learners, students who are ELs in CalPADS. So once again, we can open it up, English learners, going to scroll down. And here are the breakdown of the claims. Reading, 47.92, almost 50% of our English learners are scoring below standard in reading. 57% writing, 30% listening, and 38.86 research and inquiry. Just a great way to go over, dive into the data. Remember, data is data. It's providing us what we need to begin, really our compass to begin focusing on areas of opportunity. It is what it is. It's like going to the doctor, stepping on the scale. It is what it is, but it's going to help us go over and give us one data point to go over and begin whatever it is we need to address. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the presentation. And let's, from current slide. So we went over, we looked at all the different achievement levels. We looked at claim information. One claim was really popping out for us, and that was writing. That was writing as an area of opportunity. We also broke it down by disability status and English language acquisition status. You can also break it down by ethnicity. You could break it down by foster homeless. There's so many different ways we can break down the data to go over and identify, once again, identify areas of opportunity. There's nothing personal about data. It's just telling us and giving us a glimpse into what areas of opportunities may be out there for us to focus on. And so in a few minutes, you're going to be able to go into the system. You'll be able to look through your organization or wherever you'd like to look through and find areas of opportunity similar to the process we went through here. So let's take a very quick moment, and we're going to do a very quick notice and wonders about, and once again, writing was something that popped up as an area of opportunity as we were looking at the live site. And so this right here is not going to be exactly the same as what we were looking at, but we do know that writing was an area of opportunity. So once again, focusing on the percentage of students that are below standard. We want to simplify that view. We want to focus on percentage of students below standard. Once again, remember, our goal is to reduce that percent. We want to increase those scores, therefore increasing, hopefully, scale scores. So for the below level standard in the writing claim, we have anywhere between 22.74% of students, that's grade 11, and 36.3% of students, which is grade 3. many different scores as we look across. We also have the stems for the achievement level descriptors. Achievement level descriptors, they are in your note-taking guide, and they're very important. They give us just a glimpse into what the expectations are for the different claims. The full text is in your note-taking guide, but for above standard, student demonstrates thorough ability. It's almost like I couldn't read what was on that slide right there. For near standard, student demonstrates some ability, and for below standard, student does not yet demonstrate ability. And that's where some of the larger percentages that we were looking at is in that particular area, the below standard area. The rest of those stems read to produce well-organized, developed, and supported writing, e.g. narrative, informational, explanatory, and argumentative for different purposes and audiences. So let's take a few minutes to do just some very quick notice and wonders and make some connections between the results with some of these descriptors. So what do we notice about what we see here on this slide? What do we notice about the data? And we're actually going to open up the chat right here. And we'll place those, our notice and wonders, in the chat. Yeah, very little change between 4th and 5th. 1/3 of the students are below standard in 3rd through 5th grade. Writing ability is increasing as we increase in the grade levels. Yeah, grade 11, the lowest percentage of students below standard. So looking at this, if we're in a district level, where might we want to focus, right? Where might we want to go over and thoughtfully put some of our resources? What potential grade levels? Love it, love it. Great thoughts, great notices, great wonders. Grade 3 has the most below standard. I'm going to give you $20. You're the plant in this training right here. So yeah, 3rd grade is the lowest. And that's something we are going to touch on in the next few minutes. First time taking the test, absolutely. Lots of different notices. Love it. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to have some hands-on exploration time. So we're going to have about 10 minutes here to explore data for your site, to review claim data, descriptors. There are links for the descriptors on the site itself as well. So the steps for how to access the site and instruction on how to drill down to those areas we showed in our demo are all in your note-taking guide. So let's take, well, what time is it right now? It is 3:30. We're going to take 10 minutes. So once again, in the past, this was on a preview site. It's no longer on a preview site. This is on the public site now. Test results for California assessments, and it's in your note-taking guide, and it's also on the CAASPP.org website. So it is 3:30 right now. It's actually 3:31 now. So let's come back at 3:41. At 3:41, you'll have an opportunity to go in, drill down to the claims in your site, and also student groups, excuse me. So student groups and claim data, and we'll look for areas of opportunities. We'll come back in 10 minutes. So happy data digging. We will see everybody back here at 3:41.
We have a question going on in the chat about the difference between suppressing test data at 10 students or fewer or claim data for groups of 30 or fewer.
Oh, that's a great question. So the difference between the two is in order for us to get claim data that's valid and reliable, and I'm talking about just claim data. For claim data, we have to have 30 or more students. But if we're talking about, let's say, overall percentages of standard met, standard exceeded, so on and so forth, then if you have 10 or more, then you'll get data for that particular set of students, if that makes sense. So 10 or more, we'll be able to see percentages of students met, exceeded, standard met, so on and so forth. But if we're talking about claims, it has to be 30 or more students.
Now, one's psychometrics, the other's privacy. Psychometrics has to do with the number to be able to draw a reliable conclusion based upon what we're actually seeing. The other one is about the idea that if we have less than this number, there can be privacy issues. And so the state has never released it when it comes that way. So that's kind of what you see from that.
Love it. Thank you, Corey. All right, it is 3:41. So we had some time to do some digging. And so what we're going to do right now, and please, please, please do not go over and press enter yet, but we're going to have what's called a waterfall chat. It's just one way to go over and share out one key takeaway from our data that we were analyzing. So please, once again, wait until I say go. But what you're going to do is you're going to type in the chat without pressing enter. We are not pressing enter. Going to type in one key takeaway from looking at your data on the public site. You're going to just type it in, but you will not press enter. You're not going to hit enter yet. And then what we'll do is when we do, we'll do it together. So once again, one key takeaway from looking at your data on the public site. What's one key takeaway? And go on ahead and hit enter. And there's our waterfall. Seeing specific grade levels popping through right here. Seeing reading. Writing is a focus that I'm seeing popping up. We have work to do? Yes, we do. But the data will at least help us move in that general direction. Once again, it's a compass. It's a compass to help us guide to start our initial decision making. Love it. Looking at data by claims and by grade levels. Yeah, a lot of writing popping up. And it's consistent. So it's happening in a lot of the organizations and schools and districts that we support. So it's consistent. Love it. And I'm seeing individual areas that we're identifying. So once again, data's data. It's just going over. There's nothing personal about it. It just goes over and it helps us identify the areas where we need to begin. So thank you for participating in that waterfall chat. And we're going to continue on with our data journey because some of this data, claim data, lives on the test results for California Assessment's website. But there's another way to get even more granular data, and that lives in CERS. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to do another demonstration in CERS and going with the idea that as we've been looking at data, we've identified writing as an area of opportunity. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go into a live demo in the CERS sandbox. And so just a reminder, the sandbox is completely fictitious. None of it is, no real students, no real data in it, but it's a great way for us to go over and look at what is in the system, what is in CERS, and it could be copied over to the real system. But for our purposes here, we're going to use the CERS Sandbox account. So I'm going to leave the presentation right now. And we're going to go to CERS. Once again, this is a data journey. This is one way of doing it. You can modify it, you can change it, you can treat it like a buffet, take certain pieces of it, add certain things to it, whatever secret sauce you want to add to it. So I'm on the CAASPP.org site. How do I get to the Sandbox account? I click on CERS. If the button on the left is the real CERS, but we're going to be using, once again, the sandbox account. That way, we're not showing any PII, any personal identifiable information for any students. And so I'm just going to log in as a sample district. And so when I log in, we identified through the data that third grade scores were our greatest area of need. But maybe there might be something that could go over and give us even more granular information. So I've chosen the sample elementary school. You're seeing me choose third grade. Based on the data, we knew writing in third grade was a really big struggle. So when I'm in CERS, notice I hit the plus sign, it opened up, gave me all of my options for the different assessments that are in CERS. And so what I'm going to do is pull up grade 3 ELA summative. And so as I pulled up third grade ELA summative, it's giving me my results. So at first we started off on the state website. It was very high level, looking at standard met, standard exceeded. Then we started looking at claims. We identified writing as an area of need. Then we identified that third grade was an area of need with writing. And so now we have it pulled up in CERS. And so once I've clicked on show results for students, once again, it's going to give me all of the information for the different students, how they scored, everything is sortable. But there's a really great report in CERS where if I click on results by student, a drop down is going to open up. So I can view this as results by students, writing trait scores, or Lexile reports. We knew that writing was an area of opportunity for us. So if I click on writing trait scores, it's going to change the view of what I'm seeing. So I'm just zooming in a little bit, my apologies. So looking at third grade scores, notice that the different genres that students could be assigned, and this is a sandbox account, I'm going to let everybody know right away. If it's third grade, it would only be three options, and these are not all the options. Argumentative would not be an option, but it's a sandbox account. But as we look at the different categories, evidence and elaboration, organization, and purpose and conventions, we can actually see what the average score was for each student. So that's just for argumentative, 2.5, 2.5, and a 1.2. I can click on a different genre and notice how that changed for me. So I'll show that again. Argumentative, our students were averaging a 2.5, a 1.2 when we got to conventions. And here's explanatory. We've gone from this very broad, very high level data to very granular now. Something that's also really important is percentage of students that are scoring a 0. If you have students that are scoring a 0, there's some sort of condition code that's going to be involved with it, whether it was blank, maybe it was off topic, maybe it was off purpose. If we have a large percentage of students that are either off topic or off purpose, they wrote a really great piece, but it was off purpose or off topic, that could be a low-hanging fruit if it's consistently happening throughout the whole grade level or throughout the whole school. Maybe that's something that's happening within our pedagogy. Maybe that's something that's happening within our structures when we're teaching writing, whatever it is. But it's taking a look at that data to go over and identify areas of needs. So you're able to go over and see just the different genres that the students were assigned. So once again, we've gone very broad, and now we've gone very, very granular, because what this is potentially going to help us to do is make our decision-making easier. And it also provides the why. Sometimes we'll get asked, why are we focusing on narrative? Why are we focusing on informational? Well, the data tells us. That's our why. And it's a very easy why to communicate. So I'm having all the fun right here, but it's time for me to actually go back into the presentation, because this is not about me. This is about you. So what we're going to do right now, and I'm looking at my clock. Are we still good on time right now? We're not behind at all? Perfect. All right, so this is going to be your turn. You'll have 8 minutes to explore your data in CERS. So please note that if you do not have your CERS login information, You can always use the sandbox account. That's the one that I used. Great way to go in and just see what's inside of the system. And so the steps for accessing CERS and the instruction on how to drill down into the areas we showed you in the demo are all in your note-taking guide. So once again, we'll have 8 minutes. We're going to explore CERS just to go over and identify even deeper areas of opportunity, area of needs, and maybe a potential starting point. So it is 3:51 right now. Let's come back at 3:59. 3:59. We'll do some exploring inside of CERS. So happy data digging. It is 3:59. Welcome back, everybody. Once again, great questions. One thing, and this is just going to be a little bit of extra credit for everybody for being here, because I feel like we are all friends, because we had some really great questions pop up about individual scores. So I'm actually just going to go back really quick to results by student. We are still on grade 3 ELA summative. But what we can do is, if I were to click on the individual students, I don't want to sound like I'm a salesman here. I completely apologize, but the system is so fantastic. If I were to click on an individual student's name, and if I click on Toby, once again, fake information, but if I click on print Toby's report, and if I create a report, it will create what are called an ISR, an individual student report. And so when I click on it and look at his data, we can actually see, and I'm going to zoom in on this, where Toby scored. But if I scroll down, it will give me what genre he was assigned and his actual scores for the different categories, the evidence and elaboration. Once again, these are all from a rubric. This is completely fake data, but if there was a condition code involved, if this student were to score a 0, it would specifically give me what condition code he earned on this. So once again, these are called ISRs, individual student score reports, and it gives you even more granular information. So just a really great report. Once again, I don't want to make it sound like a salesman, but it's a great product. All right, so why did we go in? Why did we look at smarter balanced summative, and then breaking it down by claim, and then going into CERS and identifying even more specific genres that are potential areas of opportunities? Why did we do that? Well, we can connect it. And so with that, I'm going to hand this off to Corey to talk about connecting the claim and target information to interims.
Okay, so remember what we said at the beginning. We talked about this idea that we were going to be identifying a process. I'm hoping that you actually see this step-by-step process. You go on to the next slide there, Joe. We are, sorry, I'm not running the trigger. There we go. All right. So we reviewed the summative data first. You gave us this idea of where the summative data was. We looked at different types of reports that were available for us, and we identified, as Joe loves to say, that area of opportunity. And the thing we saw in the data that we were looking at was that 3rd grade writing. That was an area that we found was an area of opportunity specifically. And then we went in to CERS and we actually looked at those writing extended responses scores. And we found that as very specific areas of focus that we could look at in narrative. So we looked, we drilled down, we started from what we actually had, we drilled down to find an area of opportunity and found some specific elements. Well, the nice thing is that we have some resources available to be able to address some of those areas of concern or areas of opportunity. And what we do with that, in your actual note-taking guide, you have links to some of these guides. And you may have seen these in the past, but we want you to make sure to take a look at those. Now, we're going to give you a few minutes to look at them, to be able to see what some of these interim assessment blocks, some of these assessments that are available to you through Smarter Balance that will help you address. Now, remember, we're not just talking about the idea of testing, but we're talking about the process that we use to collect data from a reliable source that actually is aligned to the content that's been identified to be most important. And we've identified through our data, kind of our little data walk that Joe has taken us through, and where can we actually find some of these resources to say, what is it that we should be able to use? Again, as Joe says, we feel like a salesperson, but I want to say I'd much rather feel this way, because a salesperson has a belief in the product that we're actually talking about. And we believe in these. These actually do, they're great ways for us. The resources aligned to these, whether they be the actual assessments or those areas that you can use to calibrate and teach from, is really useful. So take a few minutes. You have these flyers. If you actually look into your note-taking guide, in the note-taking guide, you're going to find each one of these interim assessment flyers, a link to them. And I want you to take a few minutes, and I want you to see, thinking about what you went through, where you actually spent your time and found those areas of opportunity. What might you actually do? Which one might you actually use to address some of those areas? So Joe, if you take us on to this next one, we're going to give you about 5 minutes to take a look through the link and find, either you can use the same one we found, which this is the narrative area based upon the writing, or you can dig in and find something that you found if you had your own scores. So take a couple minutes, look at those, and we're going to bring that back and have a chat for just a couple minutes. About 5 minutes, is that okay? We'll bring you back at 4:10.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Welcome back from perusing the interim assessments that are available. So just an interesting, just a question we have for everybody right now. You probably went through, looked at the different available interim assessments. And so once again, going back to that conversation from the very get-go, areas of opportunity, excuse me, I can't speak today. Identifying areas of opportunity for us to go over. Once again, begin, it's like a compass. Doesn't mean we're going to stick with it the full year, but it's what we're going to begin with. Using that to go over and connect to interim assessments out there. What interim assessments did you identify as just the starting point for you? And so in the chat, what we'll do is we'll just place them in the chat right now. What focused IAB or IAB did you identify to, and I'm going to be very careful with my wording here, not to give, but to use. There's a difference between giving assessments and using assessments. That right there is completely stolen, and I loved it. I heard it last week at the California Assessment Conference. As we're using assessments, even the words we use, difference between giving and using. So we'll use that terminology here as well. Which interim assessment are you going to use based on the data that you went through today? And so we'll put that in the chat right now. We love it. Grade 7 ELA, write and revise argumentative texts, IAB brief writes, performance tasks. Yeah, those are great ones to use. And it's all based on your context. You might have data that doesn't necessarily mirror what we're seeing statewide, so could be a different one as well. So we're seeing brief writes a couple of times. Interim assessments. What interim assessment are we going to use based on these last few minutes that we've had, being able to identify it? High school statistics and probability. Love that. AP Bio teacher here. Love that. So once again, it's what we're going to use, not necessarily what we're going to give. And so we'll continue to put those in the chat. One other thing that we saw in there was a question about, is there a connection? Are there resources that connect claims, targets, and standards? And so I saw Corey put into the chat the link for Smarter Balanced Content Explorer. If you haven't had a chance to go into that site, it is a fantastic resource where there are it'll be in the test development area. I believe in module 3, we're going to go much deeper into Content Explorer and connecting claims, target, standards within there, but that'll be part of module 3, but great resource.
Yeah. I have one comment. I've had a couple people asking me as you're talking as well about the idea of tips and tricks. And I want to highlight just one more time what Joe was talking about is the difference between giving and using. Use implies a plan. I have developed a system and a process where I'm going to say we're going to use and what that's going to look like with the analysis and what that's going to look like to inform my teaching process, what that's going to look like actually in the overall work that we're doing in the year. The interim assessments are more than a test. That's what I'm saying to you. We're not just talking about testing to make the kids smarter. That's not what we're doing. Formative assessment is also about the use of the assessment in that process. And so really the resources that are available through Content Explorer, through all of the work around the back end of the development of the assessment and looking at some of the justification for why things were included in there really speaks to what I can do as an instructor, whether it be through ELA or math, to be able to, or in a science or history, social studies around writing and some of those other areas. That process is deliberate, focused, and it really, when we get into that use, it really is what is the bang for the buck. It's not about the test. Let me just say that. Testing does not make kids smarter. It's not the testing that does. It's the process and the teaching. It's what we do best. It's all these resources that really allow us to focus in and be able to teach better and become better at what we're all experts in, which you are experts in when you're working with your teachers. They are experts in teaching. Let's get them some of the resources to allow them to be able to grow that. So I just really want to highlight what Joe is saying. That's very, very important for us to bring away from this conversation.
Perfect. Thank you, Corey. And let's get on to some homework. Why were we doing all the work we were doing here? Well, now that you've had a chance to go through the process of choosing an interim assessment, your homework is to administer one before module 2, before the next session. So we also recommend prior to administering an interim assessment, it's recommended that really everybody, teachers and administrators, utilize the interim assessment viewing system. It is a really great resource on the CAASPP.org website. It's been found to be really beneficial. It gives you an opportunity to go over, take the test yourself, and really to go over and just see what the rigor is going to be, the academic vocabulary, content areas, item types, and really its connections to our daily instruction, or perhaps even maybe it's disconnect. And we'll also say this: if there's a disconnect, it doesn't mean throwing out what you're doing. It's finding how we might weave what we're going through. Remember, once again, to Corey's point, it's about the use. It's about using interim assessments, not giving interim assessments. It's how it impacts what we do daily. So once again, not throwing anything out, but just going over and thinking about the weave. How are we weaving it into what we do? So the instructions on how to complete this are in your note-taking guide as well. So really, we just want to spend the remainder of our time together answering any questions that you might have about the process that we've gone through today. So once again, we just want to go back. We are not saying this is a perfect process. We are not saying it is the process or it is the only process. It's one way. It's one way to go over and work through a very thoughtful and deliberate process, from taking data from a summative assessment and having a place to begin, having a starting point built and rooted in data, because that will also feed into the why of why we're doing whatever we're doing. It's all rooted in data. The data is telling us, it's guiding us to it. So I don't know if we have any questions right now in the Q&A, in the chat.
Who assigns our roles in CERS?
That's a great question. So it depends on the organization and what the structure is. But a lot of the times, it just comes down to whoever is a coordinator. So anybody who is a coordinator, whether they are an LEA coordinator, they coordinate the whole district, or a site coordinator, they have the ability to assign in TOMS certain roles that whether it's connecting rosters to test administrators, test examiners, or assigning the role of either site educator or district educator, which you don't need rostering. You would automatically have access to all of the students inside of CERS, but it would be the coordinators, either site or district.
And do you want to talk briefly, or maybe you already hit that, but that it's CERS doesn't technically have roles?
Correct. Yeah. So yeah, to your point, to Nikki's point, CERS, the roles really come from TOMS, the Test Operations Management System. So everything is really based on whatever your role is in TOMS, and then rosters would be assigned inside of CERS, or not in CERS, well, in CERS, yes.
In terms of the homework, for anyone who's not in a classroom, what are we proposing they do before the next one, besides make a teacher friend?
That's what I was going to say. Tag a teacher friend. Might even be a great opportunity to even go in and administer it ourselves. Even at our level, I'm an LEA coordinator, and so I'm always trying to squeeze my way into certain classrooms, just so I know what it's like as well to go over and administer tests inside. So sometimes it's a phone a friend though. Tapping a teacher on the shoulder that is really antsy and wants to go over and be cutting edge. Sometimes it's going over and looking for those teachers that really want to go over and try things.
All right, that's all the questions that I see.
All right, so let's go on. So we've been saying this throughout the presentation today, but this is really the first module of a 4-module series, and they're going to build upon each other throughout the time. So this one right here, we really started with summative data and going into interims, and then connecting it to local data systems. Module 2, remember, that's going to be about the data and CERS and connecting that data for next steps with classroom instruction. And then module 3, the ecosystem of support. Some of the tools that we referenced today, we will be seeing those in module 3, whether it's a smarter annotated tool or whether it's smarter content explorer. Other tools will be touching on those in module 3. And then module 4, once again, it's talking about building your local data system to go over and help with data-driven decision-making. And so we hope that your team is available to attend each module along the way with us. We do have one more module 1 training that we will have. I believe that is the November 7th. I was going to say the 8th. I was off by a day. November 7th. So if you found this valuable, you want to share this with other colleagues in your organization, please let them know about it. Maybe you want to send a group of, not send, I'm still virtual, right? Maybe you want a group of teachers going over and attending it as well. It's going to be very similar message. So, but it's just another opportunity to go over and get everybody trained and being able to hear a similar message. So specific dates and times for each of those upcoming modules are going to be in your note-taking guide for reference though. And you can always refer back to your registration confirmation email to see which sessions you've registered for, or if you need to register for them. And with that, we've come to the official end of our training today. So we've appreciated the questions. They were really great and they were really on point. We really appreciate you being here with us. And we hope that you found this session really informative and helpful. And so on behalf of the California Department of Education, the Sacramento County Office of Education, and me and Corey, we'd like to thank you for spending your time with us today. And we'd like to see you again, hopefully for module 2, where we will dig into the interim assessment data that you're going to administer for your homework. Have a great day, everybody.